When you talk about the current NBA in 2023, many would describe it as high-paced, three-point centric, and even soft. Well, there's one guy in Miami who doesn't fit any of those labels, and that is Jimmy Butler. And for Jimmy, he is quite literally one of the last true tough guys and old school players the NBA has. And looking at his career, he's been a winner everywhere he's gone. With the Bulls in 2015, he took LeBron's Cavs to the brink, getting 2 games off them when everyone else in the East couldn't even get one. In 2018 with Minnesota, he got them in the playoffs and won their first playoff game since Kevin Garnett in 2004. 2019 with Philly, he got them as close to the finals they'd been since Iverson. And in 2020 with the Heat, he actually made the finals, and last year was one shot away from going back again. The legend of playoff Jimmy every single year continues to grow and surpass expectations. As this year in the first round, we witnessed one of the biggest upsets of all time, as his Heat team coming into the first round was 44-38, dead in the water and not a serious contender to many NBA experts. As for the season, they ranked 21st in net rating, 25th in offensive rating, and 30th in points per game. And actually going back one step further, in the play-in tournament in Game 1, they lost to the Atlanta Hawks, who are now out of the playoffs themselves. After that game, everyone wrote off Miami as a serious contender. And versus the Bulls, to be the 8th seed, were down 5 points with under 5 minutes. But per usual, playoff Jimmy worked his magic, got that W, and got the Heat into the postseason. And while that was a nice story, Jimmy carrying them, still nobody took Miami seriously, the team who could upset Milwaukee, who were the championship favorites. And I doubt anyone in the world thought Miami would beat them in 5 games, 4-1. And look, I don't want to hear the excuses, the Giannis got hurt narrative. It's the playoffs and injuries happen. And nobody is going to have sympathy for a team with an injured player. And with that being said, when Giannis actually played, the Bucks were still 0-2. And if you count Game 1 where he was limited, they were actually 0-3. So the age-old injury excuse, I'm not going to buy it. The Bucks were still loaded and should have at least took the series to 7 games. And looking back at Jimmy, what he's accomplished in Miami is what we expected Kawhi to accomplish in Los Angeles. As both these guys historically start off slow, they get semi-serious, then post All-Star break, ramp it up to playoff mode, and by playoff time are at a top 10 or top 5 level. Now, unfortunately for Kawhi Leonard, he's always hurt, and Jimmy most times healthy, ready to go, and locked in for the postseason. And looking at Jimmy's mentality or his attitude, he is quite literally the anti-Dillon Brooks, as Dillon Brooks will throw punches and hide his hand. For Jimmy, he's throwing punches the whole time, going at you, talking trash, and not backing down. And looking at the last 2 games of the series versus Milwaukee, these games were 100% personal, playing against Jrue Holiday. And for Jrue, he is widely recognized, rightfully so, as an elite defender and one of the best guard defenders in NBA history. Jimmy in this series took him to school again, and again. I've never seen Jrue Holiday get flat out embarrassed like he was this series. And looking at different defenders and Jimmy's shooting splits versus them, versus Jrue Holiday, he shot 58%, versus Chris Middleton, 50%, versus Lopez, 64%, and versus Giannis, an astounding 86%. This Bucks team all year was looked at as an elite defensive team and at worst a top 5 defensive squad. And individually, they have 3 guys who win all defensive teams, that being Lopez, Giannis, as well as Jrue. Adding that context of how good the Bucks were makes what Jimmy did even that more impressive, as in the last 2 games, he averaged 49 points per game, 8.5 boards, 3.0 assists, on near 60% shooting. And looking past that, in Game 5 in Miami, they were down 14 points entering the 4th quarter. And in Game 6, back in Milwaukee, we're down 14 entering the 4th. The odds to win both those games was under 0.5%, but Jimmy in the fourth quarter scored 21 in Game 4 and 16 in Game 5. And looking at Game 5 specifically, Butler once again proved he is not a frontrunner unlike Dillon Brooks and guys in the West. As late in the fourth quarter, once again, he was trash-talking Jrue Holiday down 6 points. Any player can trash-talk when you're up 10 points, up 15, or after a W. But there is very few players, if any in the NBA, who would trash-talk down in the fourth quarter late in the game. Now, speaking of fourth quarter play, for the entire series Jimmy was Michael Jordan-esque, not only in mentality, but also play. As in the fourth quarter, he averaged 13.7 points on 60.9% shooting, 40% from 3, and 84.6% from the free throw line with a plus-minus of plus 8.3. Looking at the Bucks' main trio, that being Giannis, Jrue, and Chris, for the entire series in the fourth quarter, they combined for only 40 points, compared to Jimmy alone, who scored 41 by himself. Very, very rarely do you see someone like Jimmy outplay 3 All-Star players in one series. And for Giannis specifically, he not only shrunk in this series, but was out-alphaed by Jimmy. As even though he's 7 feet tall, has a crazy wingspan, and insane vertical, Jimmy in this series was by far the most feared player on the court, and it wasn't close. And look, don't get me wrong, Giannis is still a great player and one of the top 3, top 2, even top 1 guys in the league. Let's not get crazy. But looking at Giannis versus Jimmy and their individual rivalry, it's pretty one-sided at this point. As career-wise, Jimmy averages 25.9 points versus Giannis, shoots better from the field, better from 3, and better from the line. And looking at their series, in 2015, 2020, and now 2023, Jimmy has beaten Giannis 3 times to only 1. And looking at individual scoring, out of their 10 best scoring performances, Jimmy has 7 of the 10, including 6 of the top 7. He has more 50-point games, 40-point games, as well as 30-point games versus Giannis head-to-head. And speaking of scoring, Jimmy's best game in the series when he scored a staggering 56 points in Miami. And looking through all of NBA history at 50-point games, this game by Jimmy was definitely special. As all time, it is the 4th most points ever in a playoff game, the 5th highest game score for a single game. He was the 5th oldest player in NBA history to drop 50, and the 9th player ever to score 20 plus points in a fourth quarter. And one last thing I do want to note, in this game Jimmy shot 80% from 2, the highest ever in a 50-point game in the playoffs. And once again, using NBA history as a gauge, Jimmy in this series averaged 37.6 points. All time in NBA history, that is top 10 for a single playoff series. And compared to other legends like Curry, Durant, Kobe, and Wade, that scoring average for a single series is higher than any of those players for their careers. And one last thing I do want to note, for Jimmy's teammates after Game 1, he lost Tyler Hero and no teammate above 18 points. And looking at Jimmy's entire career, at this point he is well on his way to being a Hall of Famer. Being a 6-time All-Star, a 5-time All-Defensive player, 4-time All-NBA, and a 1-time Steal Champ. And looking at his playoff resume in Miami, he's averaged 25.1 points, 6.8 boards, 5.5 assists on 50-35 and 83 splits. Once again showing Jimmy, come playoff time, elevates his play to top 10 status. And when it comes to the entire NBA, we desperately need more players like Jimmy. People who talk trash, aren't afraid, and are killers in the fourth quarter. As watching this series, yes, the Heat won in 5 games, but it was exhilarating every single game because of Jimmy. And my biggest takeaway from this series isn't the stats, the 40-point games, the 50-point games, it's Jimmy talking trash to Jrue Holiday down 6 points. That moment in the fourth quarter is a great picture of Jimmy Butler, his career, his mentality, and his overall attitude towards basketball. And as you can tell, I absolutely loved it. So, as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.